Everyone knows the Pokemon anime for Ash Ketchum, so it'd be kind of understandable if you decided to stop watching after his journey ended recently. Ash meant a lot to millions of people, and still does. Despite his introduction having a somewhat incoherent and shaky start, at least to me personally, that sure didn't matter to kids at the time. Plus, if I'm being honest, I really do have the anime to thank for even getting me into the series in the first place. Pokemon Go too, but that's not what this video is about. I actually still remember watching the first season of Indigo League on Netflix back when I was 11. In fact, as of the time I'm writing this, it's still on there, after nearly a decade. If that's not enough to tell you how much people loved the first season, then I don't know what will. But putting aside my rambling, once it was announced that Ash's story would be coming to a close, finally, to make way for some random girl character, the internet kinda went crazy. No one was entirely opposed to the idea from what I could see, since pretty much everyone knew that Ash had overstayed his welcome for a bit too long. Though despite that, it was still sad to see him go. I think the main reason the writers did this was so that they wouldn't have to keep dodging the question of why Ash never ages. But as much as there could have been much more when it came to the finale of Ash's story, I felt as though it was still a decent send-off for him. So with that, after the final episode, I decided to never touch the new series.
That's great. Wait, what?
Not because it looked bad or anything, but because I just wasn't really interested in it. I guess I could have been worried that it was just going to be the same old rinse and repeat filler that really bothered me about Ash's series, but instead with a bunch of weird new characters that I didn't have any emotional attachment to whatsoever. But I decided to watch it anyway, and, well, safe to say I was wrong. Turns out, Pokemon Horizons actually has more writing, depth, and humor than the original series ever had. Okay, well, actually, despite my constant jabbing at Indigo League, I do think the wit is top-notch compared to everything else the future seasons have given us when it comes to humor.
I've never seen anyone so pathetic!
Have you tried a mirror?
But that doesn't mean the new humor is any worse. While it doesn't necessarily have the same energy, it's still pretty good. Though I'll probably talk about that later. For now, yes, Pokemon Horizons is actually really good. Now, granted, I've only seen like 2/3 of the first season because Netflix just can't get enough of splitting entire seasons into 3 pieces across multiple months for some stupid reason. And since the third part of season 1 hasn't been released in English yet, this video may or may not become outdated in the future. But from what I've seen of the show so far, it makes me feel the need to talk about it as soon as I can, since I'm worried the flame might die out as I wait for the rest to come out.
Don't let the flame die out!
So if that's the case, let's just get started now. And I'm also just going to categorize everything as fast as possible because I'm a neat freak. Oh yeah, and mild spoilers, by the way.
Start out by making the character of your own choice.
Alright, say what you want, but Liko is a better protagonist than Ash. But by a small margin, Like, okay, you got me. Of course Ash is super iconic. He has a distinct 3 personalities and, well, he's Ash Ketchum. He's the Pokemon guy. He had whimsy, he had determination, he had it all, pretty much. But while that was good for a protagonist of a more exaggerated and less serious anime, Pokemon Horizons isn't exactly like that. To be honest, as much as I like Liko, I find her personality a bit hard to put into words. Thankfully, that's what Bulbapedia is for. Alright, let's see. A kind, soft-spoken, and polite girl doesn't do well in stressful situations. Oh yeah, now I remember. What the hell? That was so obvious. Why did I even need to look that up? Damn, I must be getting a heat stroke or something. It is summer and all. But that's not really the full picture anyway. There's just something that makes Liko so relatable. I also like how caring she is to the point where she's putting other people above herself. She's always concerned about potentially being a burden around those who are protecting her, thinking that she's putting them in danger just by being there.
I don't want to cause you any more problems. I just don't want anyone getting hurt because of me.
She also daydreams quite a bit in the earlier seasons, which, holy hell, she's just like me, for real. She also draws these little chibi versions of herself and her friends in her journal. She feels anxious and shy when around new people. She has like this hyperfixation on a popular social media influencer. Actually, you know what? Instead of just babbling on for like 3 whole paragraphs, I could have just said that she's autistic and then everyone would have understood what I meant. Again, she's just like me, for real. For as overly social as Ash was in his series, it was neat for kids who are, well, the opposite of Ash to have a bit of a role model to help them be a bit more open to others. Personally, despite that description fitting me to a T, I never actually thought of Ash that way. But hey, it's just something I noticed regardless. I feel like Liko, despite not really being role model material, is still really good as a character many people, not just kids, can relate to. Now, I already mentioned why, but I also wanted to note how this not only makes her a good relatable figure, but a good protagonist. Having your protagonist be relatable to a wide majority of people is a great idea, and I feel like for those who don't relate to Liko, they can still at least remain interested in her personality and behavior, while not being necessarily linked to it. Bit of a bad example, but take Greg Heffley. Everyone and their mom knows that Greg is a horrible person. Except for younger me, but that's because younger me was a bane to society. Yeah, I never got the hint back then that Greg was practically a sociopath because my 9-year-old brain was hardwired into always thinking the main character is the good guy no matter what. This is a reference to younger me thinking that I was the main character of life. But my point is, while Greg isn't exactly relatable or a good person, he's still an interesting protagonist. You want to see what he does next. You want to see what happens because of it, and you want to see if he'll ever change for the better. And I'm not saying Liko is a bad person, not at all. I'm comparing how well they work as protagonists for everyone, regardless of how relatable they are. Now, granted, Liko is about 1,000,000 times more relatable to the common person than Greg Heffley ever was. But I still felt the need to express how much of a great protagonist Liko is. But, is she a good character? I mean, yeah, duh. I would say more, but I've wasted too much time talking about Greg Heffley of all things. So I guess now I'll just talk about her Sprigatito. It's cute, and is a cat. On to Roy. Fun fact, he doesn't actually appear until like episode 4, which is better than episode 5, I guess. But regardless, I do like his relationship with the best Paldea starter, aka Fuecoco. Like, sure, it is a bit cringy when they sing or whatever, but that's one of the cons when watching a kids show that secretly contains actual mature writing, despite it being the bare minimum of said mature writing, and it's also somewhat scarce. But yeah, he's basically just Ash 2.0, which isn't an insult, by the way. I feel like having some of that energy is a good way to balance the more serious tone. I don't want to say too much about Dot since she has this whole arc thing that happens and I'd rather you all just watch the show. But I will say it's pretty nice when she starts to open up to everyone else.
So this is how Pokemon battles really are? It's complete chaos.
And I like it.
And if you thought Liko was reclusive, oh, you're dumb. I never said Liko was reclusive. I like how Dot starts off hating food, but then starts to like it, because I like it when people like food, because how could you not? Speaking of food, I like the chef guy, Murdoch. He's pretty cool, and his name reminds me of that one Thomas character nobody remembers. He also sounds like he's actually voiced by the correct race, which I always appreciate. There's also this guy named Freed, who's always forgetting to tell people vital information. Sort of like how I forgot to mention the fact that this series takes place on a giant airship.
I did tell you about that, didn't I?
No, you didn't!
He has a Pikachu named Captain Pikachu because this is Pokemon, and yeah, somehow he just trusts this mouse with everyone's lives. To be fair, at least the thing has personality compared to Ash's Pikachu. But I still can't get over the dramatic reveal of who the captain is. Like, when it's revealed, the score in the background and the way the scene is formatted just makes it so obvious that they want you to be all surprised or excited, like they're telling you, "Look, it's Pikachu! It's the yellow guy! Look! Buy more merchandise!" Also, there's this woman, Orla, who, like, runs the engines and stuff for the ship, and I want her to sit on my face. I find it quite fascinating and creative that she uses fire-type Pokemon to power everything. Like, that's so neat, right? Then there's the nurse lady whose name is like Molly, I'm pretty sure, and she does nothing. Okay, fine. She does like one thing in a later episode that's something centered around her, and her backstory is a tad bit interesting. Side note, in that same episode I just mentioned, there's this Paldean Whooper that's just like dead on the floor, and it's like the funniest thing ever. I'm just imagining it. Anyway, but wait! I hear you all clamoring. What about the villains? Jesse James and Meowth were probably the best part of Ash's story, if I'm being honest. So let's see how the new villains compare. They're bad. Like, they're just very boring. There's like 3 of these goons, and they all kind of fail in comparison to Team Rocket. Though, granted, the bar is like extremely high, so I never really had much confidence in the first place. First, there's Amethio, the leader of the 3. And at first he seems to be attributing to the plot really well. He actually poses quite the threat against Liko and the Rising Volt Tacklers. That's the name of the people on the ship, by the way. And even though I personally like Armarouge better, Ceruledge is definitely the perfect partner for him. The woman whose name is never mentioned seems to have a fun personality when, spoilers. Sprigatito is kidnapped and Amethio and the rest don't know what the hell to do with it. So she decides to play with and take care of Sprigatito, showing a bit more of a bubbly side to her. But then the gang rescues Sprigatito, which makes her sad for like 2 episodes. And after that, she becomes dull and boring. Yay. Then the third person is a buff dude who does jack squat. I mean, yeah, he talks, but I guess that makes everyone special then. Obviously, Amethio is the best of the 3 for reasons. But that's not to say he doesn't start to become weak as well. In fact, he and the other two people don't even appear throughout most of Season 1 Part 2, so I completely forgot they existed until they appeared again. Also, his motivations become much more flip-floppy as things progress. Like, he starts out wanting Liko's pendant, but then he gives up because they also need to kidnap her in order for it to work, which I guess he didn't want to do that. So then he decides to chase after this shiny Rayquaza, long story, before the heroes can find it. But then during the last episode of Part 2, he gives that up and decides to go back to the whole pendant thing.
No, Bomb, you're not good at this, buddy. It's charming up to a point, and now it's just sad.
That pendant.
However, I do kind of like how much more threatening their boss is compared to Giovanni. Like, with Giovanni, he was sometimes portrayed in less threatening manners from time to time, but I feel like with a big boss that's anonymous and super evil and stuff, that can have a lot of suspense, and I really like that. Like, it would still be bland and uninteresting, but hey, let's just see what happens. Also, for one episode, there's this forgettable side villain who's just your typical insensitive anime antagonist with a sexy voice. Like, he's just so vague and mysterious with his answers and stuff that I kind of just hate him. But I also kind of like how he just briefly loses his sanity at some point.
Well, this just got a lot more interesting.
Oh my gosh, this guy's insane.
Are there any other characters I'm missing? Oh yeah, Liko's parents are hot, and her dad's an artist, so he gets bonus points. He just like me, for real.
Pokemon.
Okay, so now I'm just gonna explain the plot somewhat briefly, since I don't really want to spoil much. Basically, I'll just explain the basic idea of what sort of happens. A synopsis, if you will. Plus my thoughts on everything. I think it's pretty understandable that the series starts off in Kanto, since that was the first ever region. And there's a decent explanation for it. Like, Liko comes from Paldea, but she travels to a school in Kanto. Okay, I mean, if you really want the show to start off in Kanto to stroke your Gen 1 ego, that's probably the best way to do it. For most of the first episode, it's basically just some neat little slice of life stuff with Liko building a bond with Sprigatito at her school. But then the meth guy appears and she's like, "Why is this random dude giving me a letter from my grandmother asking for my pendant? I don't know him, my grandmother doesn't know him. This is kind of Among Us." I'm sorry on my behalf. So she jumps out the window to escape. Amatio finds her on the roof of the school and tries to take the pendant by force for a reason I'd rather not say because I want you guys to watch the damn show. Suddenly, Freed appears with his Charizard, kicks the dude's ass, and brings Liko to the Brave Olivine, aka the Airship, to protect her, and also so they can have magical adventures with everyone else. She then gets used to the people around her, and that's it so far. What? I did say I'd make it brief. Yeah, if I just explained the whole plot in excruciating detail, then there'd be no point in you watching the show. But I guess that all sort of came out of nowhere. Too bad I'm not as good at writing as the people who wrote Pokemon Horizons, so I'm not very experienced when it comes to pacing. Even if it's just for a synopsis. Though, forgetting all that, I think the plot is solid. And that's it!
People who do this for a living deserve more credit and respect!
To be honest, I'm running out of things to say since I've basically said everything I love about this series. Turns out the characters carry most of it, despite the plot being neat on its own. But what about the animation? Well, just imagine the animation for Journeys, but the animator's locked in. Yep, there are actually a lot of incredibly animated shots here. As someone who actually animates once in a blue moon in my spare time, it really is impressive how much work goes into every frame. And I know that's been said to death, but at least you guys know now that I have that mindset. It's crazy to think some people out there don't understand how tedious this form of art really is. But those people get no significant others. As much as I want to say big swears to scare off Kappa, I don't really want to risk being demonetized. Actually, wait, I'm not even monetized yet. I'm still not even at 1,000 subscribers. Alright guys, you know the drill.
Actors.
This is going to be the shortest category for obvious reasons. It's also the last category, depending on if I can remember whether or not I have more to say about this damn show. But despite that, the voice acting is really good, which honestly is to be expected. But I must say, the voices are a lot more immersive than really anything I've seen involving the anime. Kudos to the actors for making Roy actually sound like a kid, and Orla actually sounds submissive and brief.
Alright, I get it!
I mean, I can't really do a conclusion without just repeating myself. So like, it's good. It's like a 7, no, 8, 7.5, no, 7.75 out of, oh, forget it, 8 out of 10. Final answer. No, wait! Manaphy out of 10. Wait, no, then that'd be a 10 out of, 8 out of 10. The end. Watch it now. In all seriousness, I'm looking forward to seeing more episodes of Horizons, and I'd be happy to hear your guys' thoughts on it, if you've seen it. Which, if not, watch it and come back to let me know. If you want, of course. I'm not forcing you. Unless. Anyways, see you guys in the next video, which may or may not be an hour-long marathon coming out at the end of this month. Goodbye!
No, thank you. I don't want it!
Because who cares about your cookies?
It was more than cookies. You wrecked my feelings, young man.